Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
We're feeling it. I'm sure more and more Canadians are feeling that pinch right now.
How the latest interest rate hike affects everything from your mortgage to everyday spending. Also, BC mayor salaries revealed, who's making what across the province. And
in this music, even though it was written a century and a half ago, it's still got a pertinence and a relevance.
remembering Maestro Bramwell Tovey, Vancouver's longtime musical leader, dead at age 69.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Lien Yeung. If you pay a mortgage, a credit card, or are trying to buy a home, brace yourself for some cold reality. Today, in a record move, the Bank of Canada increased its benchmark interest rate by a full percentage point as it works to fight inflation. John Hernandez has more on the impact to your bottom line.
Today, we raised the policy interest rate by 100 basis points, 1 percentage point.
It's the latest move to combat soaring costs that are just about everywhere.
An increase of this magnitude in one meeting is very unusual.
The Bank of Canada has raised its benchmark interest rate by 1 full percentage point to 2.5%, a hike that eclipsed many expectations.
We knew 100 wasn't out of the question, but it was a little bit surprising to wake up this morning and see Bank of Canada make such an aggressive maneuver.
The rate hike is meant to fight runaway inflation as prices at the pumps and grocery stores continue to eat into the pockets of Canadians.
You know, for the first time in 40 years, we're in a very sharply rising rate and high inflation environment. And the government does want everybody to just stop spending money and calm that inflationary pressure down.
Its impact will be most directly felt in Canada's housing market, already slowing down after 2 red-hot years fueled by low interest rates.
But to actually seeming to get that pen to paper seems to be the part that everyone's having trouble with, not knowing where this, the rates, which is affecting everything right now in the market, where they're leading to.
People with variable rate mortgages can now expect to pay hundreds of dollars more a month, and those trying to get into housing markets like Metro Vancouver could face further challenges.
Someone who maybe had just saved up a down payment, maybe you're ready to buy that home, this could potentially squeeze you out.
The benchmark rate is also tied to lines of credit and even some vehicle payments. Experts urge those already in debt not to take on more than they can handle.
This is the time to have a look at your personal financial situation.
More rate hikes are expected in the coming months to try to get inflation down to about 3% next year. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
Indigenous women in BC have experienced a significant increase in intimate partner violence during the pandemic. These are the findings of a community-led survey done in part by the BC Association of Aboriginal Friendship Centres.
There's a widespread fear by Indigenous women who are seeking services, and it's a racism-based fear. They're afraid that they're going to be negatively judged. They are worrying that if they raise this issue with the police, that they're going to end up with their children being apprehended.
She says there is a strong need for culturally suitable services, especially housing, and programs led by Indigenous organizations. The survey results are part of a substantial new report called The Road to Safety. It finds nearly 4 in 5 Indigenous women and gender-diverse people reported a rise in violence since the pandemic began. A majority reported challenges getting help or accessing supports. The Kamloopa Powwow Society is responding to criticisms calling its regulations colonial and exclusionary. Organizers of the popular Indigenous summer gathering are now apologizing.
My deepest sympathy to those who have been hurt and harmed in that posting. I know that those rules have been enforced for 20 plus years, and today, you know, we're more open to acknowledge our two-spirited and even who our Indigenous community is, that it includes First Nations, Métis, and the Inuit people.
The rules coming under fire include those quantifying Indigenous ancestry and requiring dancers to follow binary gender categories. Critics call these expectations discriminatory. Organizers say they will be updating the regulations. The Kamloopa Powwow is the largest event of its kind in Western Canada and is held each July in Kamloops. New Westminster is dropping its well-known moniker as the Royal City. It means a rebrand for BC's first capital, which historically has embraced its colonial past. Not everyone supports the change, but as Joel Ballard reports, the city is making room for a broader history beyond the crown.
Climbing the hillside off the Fraser River, New Westminster has been known as the Royal City for more than a century.
A contingent of royal engineers arrived here to establish a capital for a new colony that was struck by Queen Victoria. And so from the start, there was this sense of royalty, I guess, attached to the city.
It stuck. And today, that influence is visible around the community, at City Hall, businesses, all the way to local brews. But that relationship with the Crown is changing.
I think we do need to recognize that the central branding for the city, which really does have to represent the entire city, probably shouldn't be just solely focused on one aspect of the city's history.
On Monday, Council voted to rebrand the city and move away from that colonial legacy. The chief of the Kakite First Nation says it can now encompass more of the area's history and people.
My ancestors were all here at that time, and so we should be recognized as well.
Long before Europeans arrived on the banks of the Fraser, the territory was used by First Nations like the Kakite, Kwantlen, and Musqueam. The rebrand is welcomed.
I believe the people in Canada are listening now to the legacy of what happened to our people, of how we were treated, how we were oppressed, how we were not allowed to function as human beings.
Not everyone supported the change. One councillor called for more consultation, saying the decision moved ahead too quickly since many residents take pride in the city's royal connection.
I think doing this and doing it so rapidly is going to create winners and losers, and that's not what I want to see in my community.
Mayor Cote says engagement comes next.
Or we can evolve and find a branding that really does represent a very diverse community and our path forward, while still recognize that there are lots of parts of our history and traditions that we want to keep.
Moving forward, the city will drop the crown and move away from the Royal City tag while it looks to rebrand, something that Cote says will likely take a few years. Joel Ballard, CBC News, New Westminster.
Now, New Westminster isn't the only place in BC reconsidering its name in the spirit of reconciliation. On Haida Gwaii, the village of Queen Charlotte, Queen Charlotte has restored its ancestral name. It's now known as Dodging Geeds.
Reconciliation, it means many, many different things. And it is our community's desire to work with the Haida Nation to make our home a healthier place for everyone.
Dodging Geeds means dancing hat in the Haida language and replaces the English name that's been adopted since the early 1900s. The Village Council and Haida Nation worked together on the process, which the mayor says has the support of a majority of residents. This is the first municipality in BC to undergo such a change and comes more than a decade after the Queen Charlotte Islands were renamed Haida Gwaii. Dodging Geeds, as it will be known going forward, of course, is one of 161 municipalities in BC. They all have a mayor and council. And over the last couple of weeks, our municipal affairs reporter, Justin McElroy, tracked down and analyzed the salaries paid to each one. It's quite the project indeed, as always, Justin. So you charted these results, and what do they look like?
Yeah, it's interesting, Leanne, because you can know what's happening in your community, what the mayor and council makes, but when you compare it to everywhere else in BC, it can sort of put things in perspective. And what does it look like? Well, it looks like this. These are the dots corresponding to the populations of every municipality in BC, from just under 100 all the way to 600,000 with Surrey and 500 with Vancouver, and the salaries. And you can see most of them are below 100,000 or 50,000 in actual fact. It's only the top ones right at the top that make more than 100,000. For the most part, it's concentrated in that lower level below 50,000. And for councillors, it's less than 20 or 30,000 for the vast majority of municipalities in this province. So it's the ones at the top that we talk a lot about the most. But overall, throughout British Columbia, being a mayor or especially being a councillor is not a full-time job. It's part-time, and it's reflected in the salaries that are seen for local government officials.
Right, as we can see in some of those little dots in that 20,000 and below line, so quite a bit of those.
It's the vast majority of them if you look at it.
Yes, for sure. And now we all want to know the dot at the very top. So who's the person making the most, or which municipality is it?
Yeah, well, and that top one right there, that's actually Coquitlam Mayor Richard Stewart. If you look at the top 10, it's all places in Metro Vancouver, and Coquitlam leads the list there at just over 180,000. Langley City is at 134,000 in 10th place. And you might be saying to yourself, well, Langley City, that's only about 30,000 people or so. How is that beating Kelowna or Kamloops or anywhere else? But if you take a look, whether you're a big city, a medium city, or a small city, it's always Metro Vancouver where the mayors make a lot more, 30, 40, sometimes even $50,000 more than similarly sized municipalities in the rest of the province. So local government has one stakes and one sort of salary when it comes to the mayors and council, but for the rest of the province, it's still very low, as all of these charts attest. You can look at them all at cbc.ca/BC, search for your own municipality, and get a sense of exactly how much your local officials are making.
Always very interesting stuff. Thank you so much, Justin McElroy, our Municipal Affairs reporter. Well, thousands of people will be moving to Vancouver in the coming decades, and the city is making room along Broadway, a main thoroughfare and the route of a future SkyTrain line. Benit Brach takes a look at the massive project and why the controversial decision leaves some feeling uneasy about their future.
So Vancouver Council has approved plans for what's being called the city's second downtown, and here's what you need to know. It's called the Broadway Plan, and it's a 30-year development that'll make room for 50,000 more people to live on the Broadway corridor, specifically from Clark to Vine Street and between 1st and 16th Avenues. Basically, it'll mean a whole lot of new housing surrounding a SkyTrain expansion, with new stations at Great Northern Way at Emily Carr to Arbutus. And SkyTrain construction is already underway, like here. But it is a controversial project, and getting it through council wasn't easy. Part of the plan involves building as high as 40 stories centered around SkyTrain transit stations. Critics say buildings like that don't have a place south of Falls Creek and could impact views of the city and the look and feel of the neighborhood. And residents are also worried that older and more affordable 3-story rentals could be replaced by towers with smaller and more expensive units. But the city also promised not to displace existing residents. And if a renter has to relocate, the mayor has said that they will be generously compensated or guaranteed the right to return with rent at or below their current rate. The city says the plan will create more space for jobs, shops, housing, and amenities. Supporters say the plan is needed to accommodate about 1 million people expected to move to the region in the next 30 years. While the plan is approved, there's still over 20 amendments that will be debated by the new city council after October's election. That includes a new bike lane down Broadway or having thinner buildings to leave room for side lawns and tree canopies.
Now, that piece from Benit comes from CBC Vancouver's TikTok account, so you can check us out on there for more short news videos and to see what's going on around Vancouver. Well, BC is getting more money from the federal government for new electric vehicle charging stations. 128 of them are being built.
British Columbians know the importance of electric vehicles in fighting climate change. I'm pleased to say that British Columbia leads all jurisdictions in North America in EV sales. We have done well in accelerating. We have a ways to go.
$1.7 million will help fund 28 new public EV chargers to be built along BC highways, and another 100 chargers will be stationed at Burnaby City Hall for their electric vehicle fleet. In 2021, there were 80,000 zero-emission vehicles on BC roads. This year, 1 in 5 new vehicles sold in BC are expected to be electric. UBC's president will soon be taking a new job south of the border. After 6 years in Vancouver, in October, Santa Ono will be leaving for the University of Michigan. Students and staff on the Point Grey campus had mixed reactions to his pending departure. Our Philip Owira reports.
Santa Ono became president and vice chancellor of UBC in 2016. He is now moving to Michigan. During that university's official announcement, he referenced the job he was leaving behind.
I grew up on a college campus, the wonderful institution which is the University of British Columbia. And I know that a lot of people are watching from Vancouver and from UBC. And I want to start off by saying that it's been an honor and privilege for me to serve you. And I'm thinking of you on this day.
UBC officials say he accomplished a lot during his tenure as president.
When he first came, he developed our strategic plan with input from the community, and then he spent most of his time as president working to implement that strategic plan. So he's made lots of advancement in terms of our equity, diversity, and inclusion initiatives.
Ono says his decision to leave was influenced by family, aging parents he wants to take care of on the other side of the continent. In his letter to students and staff, Ono essentially said that he is proud of his accomplishments and that the university is in a stronger and more competitive position. But despite all of his accomplishments, some students didn't even know he was there. The university president is leaving for Michigan. How do you feel about that?
I honestly don't know shit. I'm sorry.
I actually have no idea what he did at UBC, so I have no opinion about it.
I've seen him in a bunch of UBC videos, so he's been out here, I guess, and he's been working, doing his job.
I wish him well at the new university. I have met Santa Ono before, and he was very lovely and kind.
He's done a lot for UBC, and I'm sure he'll do great wherever he goes, but it's sad that we're losing him.
Ono will start his new role in Michigan in October. Till then, he'll continue working with UBC. Philip Powera, CBC News, Vancouver.
And meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now. Joe, lots to talk about in the weather front. First of all, let's start with how gorgeous it is outside.
Oh, it really is, Leanne. Just a stunning day across Metro Vancouver. And we sort of had a bit of a fresher start, a bit of a marine air moved in overnight last night with a front that tried to get through, just made for an even more comfortable Wednesday. I want to talk about something else we're tracking, though, and that's the low tide. I want to show you some pictures. We're working on a story to bring you tomorrow with some of the lowest tides we have seen in well over a decade across Metro Vancouver. The last 3 days have been down around the 0 meter mark, and tomorrow, 1:02 p.m., we'll see those tides dip down below minus 0.1 meters. Some of the lowest tides, again, we've seen since about 2009, and you can see people out enjoying the low tides, seeing what they could find in those rock pools. So we'll bring you that full story tomorrow, but if you want to head out before then, tomorrow, 1 p.m., find your favorite beach. 21 right now at YVR, 23 out towards Abbotsford. Again, much more comfortable than where we were at yesterday. We don't have that humidity that we've been dealing with the past couple of days. Still seeing 30-degree temperatures for the interior. Just want to give you a little sneak peek at the forecast ahead. We will stay seasonal for the south coast and pretty seasonal for the interior, Leanne, but that is also dry. So we'll talk more about that fire danger, which is creeping up a little bit later on in the show.
Okay, all right. We'll talk to you in a bit. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Bramwell Tovey, the longtime music director of the Vancouver Symphony, has died. He was 69 years old. The conductor was well known for his famously cheeky sense of humor.
1, 2. 1, 2, 3.
Playful, energetic, and always a crowd favorite, Tovey was equally at home talking with the audience as he was conducting. He was widely loved for his children's concerts, adored education, and brought thousands of people into the Orpheum. He was never afraid of playing the clown to get everyone to appreciate the music, and he was instrumental in starting the VSO's School of Music. Under Tovey's direction, he helped put the Vancouver Symphony on the map. He led the orchestra on international tours and brought in some of the biggest names in classical music. Back in 2008, one of the orchestra's recordings won a Grammy Award, a rare feat for a Canadian orchestra. Former CBC radio producer Denise Ball helped put that recording together alongside Canadian violinist James Ennis. She recorded Bramwell and the symphony hundreds of times, and she struck up a friendship and a unique relationship with the Maestro. She joins me now. So Denise, first off, what were your thoughts upon hearing the news?
Oh, just great regret. You know, Bramwell was such a force of incredible energy. He was so smart and so quick. And to think that that kind of, you know, visceral presence has been silenced is really, it's just very sad. And it's a huge loss to Canadian music in right across the country, not just Vancouver, where clearly he had a big presence, but it's a national loss, really.
Absolutely. I think a lot of different cities felt his magic. And so specifically, though, here in Vancouver, what would you say was Bramwell's legacy here?
Well, I think there are a number of things. One of the big things that he should be applauded for, and again, it wasn't just a question of doing it in Vancouver, but he paid a huge amount of attention to contemporary Canadian music, and he encouraged composers and he befriended composers, and he made sure their music was played and heard and distributed. You know, when he first came to Canada, I think it was back in 1989, he worked first with the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra and came from Britain not really knowing, you know, a whole lot about Canadian music. And the first thing he did was to go to the Canadian Music Centre and spend the first, you know, days in the library checking out scores and getting to know the composers here, and established a worldly successful Canadian Music Festival there that put Winnipeg on the map. And he carried that energy and that commitment and that desire to Vancouver.
You and Bramwell work together very closely. Is there one experience with him that stands out that really says typical Bramwell Tovey to you?
Oh, I'm not sure. I guess the thing that I will always carry with me is the fact that I was able to work with him on the recording of the Grammy Award-winning record that he did with the violinist James Ennis. And, you know, we would take, it was intense, and time was always at a premium, and the clock was constantly ticking, and you're always fighting against having a deadline of needing to get that next take in before the clock ran out. And he and James would come down to the control room and they would sit and be very intent, and then they'd rush back up to the stage. And there was something about it, though. And I remember working with the recording engineer, and there were a couple of times when we would just turn to each other and say, there's some magic here. We couldn't put our finger on it, but we knew there was magic in the air. And it actually translated into the performance and into the recording and to that recognition that he put the Vancouver Symphony on the international map, and the orchestra is now known far and wide for its brilliance and its excellence, and a large part of that is due to Bramwell.
Well, Denise, thank you so much for sharing those wonderful memories of your friend. I'm sorry for your loss. Denise Ball, a former CBC radio producer and good friend of Bramwell Tovey.
Thank you.
And coming up later in the show, we'll have an emotional conversation CBC's Andrew Chang had with Maestro Tovey back in 2015 ahead of a particularly poignant performance. Protecting the oceans, how Western scientists and Indigenous knowledge keepers are teaming up on both sides of Canada. That's next. And thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Countless Afghan women and girls have made new lives here in Canada, leaving everything behind when the Taliban seized control last year. As they adjust to life here, one woman wants to make sure that they thrive. Ali Chiasson tells us how she's doing it through the power of sport.
Maria Turpakai's story is inspiring no matter who you are or where you're from. She happens to be from Waziristan.
My region was, you can say, headquartered to Taliban. As President Barack Obama said in his words, that this is the most dangerous place on earth.
Growing up in the Taliban-controlled region of Pakistan, with the support of her parents, she started to live life as a boy under a fake name so she could play sports. This afforded her freedom she didn't think was possible. First, it was weightlifting, then squash, where she would eventually compete as a woman.
I became professional. I became first Pashtun female player from that region. So, the news became very big, and I myself got, affected with the Talibanization, terrorism, and got death threats. So 10 years ago, I came to Canada myself to pursue my dream and to play sports with freedom and to enjoy that rights that I want.
So when the Taliban seized control of Afghanistan last fall and refugees started landing in Canada, Maria Turpakai started organizing a sports camp for girls.
We had many girls who the first time they were so shy to take off their, the burqa, and they were worried that how they're going to play sports. But they ran to the ball and they stretched like this, lunged, and they were like, we never thought we can do those things. So that's the first step towards freedom, like the blockage, it's removed.
The mindset.
The mindset. So I want to see that quick turning point, and that sports can give you that.
We just started like yesterday. It was our first squash class. It's really fun. So we do arts too and different activities such as playing football, squash, badminton. So it's really great.
So right now, when they're here with us, I feel that they're so happy, exciting, and this is the healing process through sports. And you would see them one day, they will be best human beings here, citizens of this country, and they will do much better for their countries too.
I want to become something in future so that I can help others back home, like girls, and like the right to education and support them.
Kind of like what Maria's doing right now, right?
She's like a role model to me, so that's why.
Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
The ocean is under significant threat from climate change to plastic pollution to biodiversity loss. So how do we make sure it stays healthy? In this final episode of our series Coastlines, we tap into collaboration between Western scientists and Indigenous knowledge keepers on how to protect our waters.
Our oceans are complex and challenging environments that are under a lot of pressure. It's obviously really important that we protect them. But how do we do that?
I'm Connell Bradwell, a wildlife conservationist here in British Columbia.
I'm Erica Porter, a fisher here in Nova Scotia.
We are the hosts for Coastlines, a CBC series that brings together young Canadians who are working to save our animals, plants and habitats on all three of Canada's coasts. And today we're talking about marine conservation. Some of my best marine wildlife encounters have happened in the area behind me, and part of it is an ecological reserve. I've seen things like orcas, humpbacks, sea lions, thousands of seabirds, and it's a great example of how life can thrive if we create marine protected areas, which can be found throughout Canada's coastlines.
So marine protected areas are clearly defined spaces in the ocean that are managed for the long-term conservation of nature, and they can do this through legal or other effective means.
This is Rianne, a conservation campaigner here in Nova Scotia who advocates for the protection of nature through MPAs. These MPAs can take on lots of different shapes and legal designations, but ultimately, they're areas that limit certain industrial and commercial activity to protect the overall health of the ocean.
Specifically, Rianne helps to show governments and local communities the benefits of marine protected areas, which apparently there are a lot of.
They can provide economic benefits, protect entire ecosystems, protecting biodiversity, help to mitigate the impacts of climate change.
So it seems that by limiting certain unsustainable activities, MPAs support the overall health of the ocean, which can be good for communities. Erica, you're a fisher, what's your take?
Yeah, so I think marine protected areas are such an important tool for conservation. I mean, especially for future generations. And from my personal experience, involving the local communities in the process of designating MPAs is so critical.
Rianne also mentioned that MPAs can help mitigate the impacts of climate change.
They can do this by protecting ecosystems that store a lot of carbon, such as salt marshes and eelgrass beds. And these ecosystems as well can provide coastal protection, so they can reduce the impacts of storm surges and sea level rise.
MPAs are really a win-win situation for climate change then, helping to prevent more global warming by storing carbon and reducing the impacts of climate change on coastal communities.
Right, and this is why Rianne says that we need more marine protected areas across Canada.
Canada's actually committed to protecting 30% of our ocean by 2030. So it's really important that we hold the government accountable to this commitment and establish a network of well-managed marine protected areas.
Like Rianne mentioned though, MPAs can take on many different forms. They can be legally protected or they could be stewarded in other effective ways.
Exactly. Here on the West Coast, Jordan Wilson from the Heiltsuk Nation sees conservation in a totally different light.
To me, conservation is just a way of life. The Heiltsuk people's beliefs of what conservation is not that we manage the land or the ocean. We actually don't even have a word for management in our language. We don't believe in managing the environment. We believe in coexisting and taking stewardship of it. In this reciprocal, symbiotic relationship, we take care of the environment and it in turn takes care of us.
That is pretty different from a legally designated MPA though, isn't it? But Indigenous people's traditional knowledge has always been its own protection plan, which is extremely important if we're going to effectively help the ecosystem to its full potential.
The Heiltsuk practice is taking only what we need, leaving behind enough to ensure the preservation of what we are harvesting, making sure it will always come back to flourish.
Indigenous knowledge and stewardship practices have been proven to be some of the most effective ways of protecting biodiversity, with some of the healthiest ocean ecosystems being actively used and stewarded by coastal communities. And that's why Jordan insists on being a good steward like generations before him.
I want to make sure that another 700 generations can continue to enjoy the beauty and the nature in our territory the way I am able to.
Now, in the Arctic, Inuit communities hold similar views of symbiotic relationships and stewardships of the ocean. Justin is from Pond Inlet, Nunavut, and has similar sentiments to how conservation is approached.
Inuit and the Arctic Ocean are deeply intertwined, and that to me is much more than just, the traditional sense of having marine conservation in the ocean.
Justin is currently living in Ottawa, helping to manage an amazing youth-led project called Ikarvik.
So Ikarvik is a group of young Inuit. We try and connect researchers and scientists into the world of traditional Indigenous knowledge.
A lot of the research that Justin and the team at Ikarvik work on is better communicating the Indigenous knowledge about the ocean. Because, like Justin says, the Arctic Ocean is such an important part of Inuit culture.
As an Inuk myself, I find it really, really empowering to see Inuit youth talk about these things when it comes to the ocean and preservation of Inuit culture and embracing that Inuit culture.
In so many ways, the Inuit have been incredible leaders in combining Indigenous stewardship of the oceans with legal protection measures. And this is something that Justin's seen in his home community.
A few years ago, Canada announced a new national marine conservation area called Dadlogotiup Imangat over in Lancaster Sound.
In 2017, Canada, Nunavut, and the Kikitani Inuit Association agreed on the final boundaries for the marine protected area, which is more than twice the size of Nova Scotia.
And I think this is a step in the right direction because not only will it protect the marine wildlife and ecosystem in the Arctic, but it also gives Inuit more self-determination. And we can have a safe place and say, yes, the waters that are traditionally used since time immemorial will be protected. And I think that's amazing.
Making this MPA together was a major milestone for strong partnerships between Canadian and Indigenous governments for protecting nature. This is a huge step forward for marine conservation.
Whatever way we go about protecting the ocean, it's clear that it's important to incorporate science, local communities, and Indigenous knowledge in ocean conservation and stewardship.
The ocean is essential to our current and future ways of life, and we all have a part to play in making sure that it's healthy for future generations.
Interest rates were meant to go up, but this quickly? That was a surprise. What the 1% bump means and who it might affect, that's next.
It was something to remember, the sight and sound of O Canada played by an orchestra of thousands. It happened at Vancouver's cavernous BC Place as the Vancouver Symphony made its bid to boost music education and to help stop the slide in symphony audiences. The idea was to bus in a few thousand students, put together the biggest orchestra ever, and get into the Guinness Book of Records. O Canada was just the warm-up. The actual record-busting event was to be a 10-minute arrangement from Beethoven's Ninth, the Ode to Joy.
We're not quite sure how it's going to sound, but even Beethoven might be able to hear this.
And I'm getting the day off from school as well, so.
Does it have to be music, or do you just have to make a noise?
We don't make a noise, Terry. It has to be music. It has to be something that is recognizable, and it is very recognizable, I think. It's pretty loud, though.
And yes, the Ode to Joy certainly was loud, even if parts of it may have fallen short of the truly joyful. In such a multitude, there were bound to be some missed cues. But never mind, they did it. The official count was 6,452 players, all playing more or less together. That blows away the old record of a puny 3,503 set 2 years ago in Birmingham, England. And when the record was confirmed, now that was an ode to joy. And once they nailed down that record, they took one more run at O Canada just for fun. And let it be said, they finished together. Johnny Malewski, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, I think Mr. Siskin has quite a cantankerous sense of humor. He's a very good critic, and also, I should say, a very acerbic writer at times. But this actually does highlight one thing that I've noticed about Winnipeg since I've lived here. You know, this is a very special city. Of course, the weather might not be everything if you like sunbathing, but it's a wonderful cold. It's a very warm cold in a funny kind of way. It's warm like the people who live here, and they're very, very special people. They make you feel very welcome, and they make you feel very at home. As far as I'm concerned, working here is a pleasure. People know and understand music. They're open to new ideas, and they're open to all kinds of new and interesting things. So, Mr. Siskind, don't feel worried about coming. I'm sure Winnipeg will make you feel very at home. For News Magazine, I'm Bramwell Tovey.
Welcome back. A huge change tonight for Canadians who borrow money. The Bank of Canada is raising its key interest rate to the size of which this country hasn't seen in nearly a quarter century, all in an effort to rein in inflation. And as Nisha Patel shows us, that can be risky for Canadians and the economy.
While Tim Capes tries to focus on his young family, the cost of his mortgage weighs on his mind.
The interest rate hikes have certainly been painful.
Every time interest rates went up, so did his payments. So he recently switched his mortgage from a variable rate to a higher fixed one.
To get that peace of mind that it's not going to keep going higher and higher, at least not for 5 years, was worth it for us.
While some homeowners will feel the squeeze, borrowing will also get more expensive for potential home buyers and anyone who relies on a line of credit to get by.
The households that are going to be impacted the most are the ones who are already struggling.
Small business owners may pay more on their loans too. This brew pub has only been open for 2 months.
To get hit at this early stage of the game, it doesn't feel nice.
The Bank of Canada started raising interest rates from record lows in March. Today's drastic hike of 100 basis points is 4 times the average move by the central bank. Policymakers called it difficult but necessary.
By front-loading the increase in interest rates, we're trying to avoid the need for even higher interest rates further down the road.
In Canada, inflation has been relentless, hitting 7.7% in May, a level not seen in 40 years. And it's a problem around the world.
We have supply chain disruptions,
really high oil prices, pent-up demand coming out of the pandemic. We're in new territory here.
The central bank can't do much about those global drivers, but higher interest rates will cool domestic spending and hopefully ease the price pressures which have caught policymakers off guard.
They're playing a bit of a catch-up here, and that's partly why they're going up so fast.
Back in Markham, Capes hopes higher interest rates will be worth it.
I'm hoping that we're going to start to see prices, especially for things like food and gas, start to come down.
A little short-term pain for long-term economic gain.
That was Nisha Patel reporting. Statistics Canada released new data from the latest census today. It offers a snapshot of the shape and makeup of the Canadian household and families. Among other findings, it shows that more people are living with roommates. As Stephen D'Souza reports, that's now the fastest growing type of household in this country.
And the kitchen is over here. It's pretty compact, but it's nice for two people.
Coming to Toronto from Calgary for a new job, Sandhya Patel was hoping to live on her own, but quickly realized she needed a roommate.
Luckily, I did have, someone that was able to move with me, my friend. So it worked out in both of our favors and, able to help cut costs a little bit.
After living with her parents in Calgary, for the 28-year-old, a roommate made economic sense.
As you progress in your 20s and go into your 30s, you're very expected to kind of save up and to have, enough money to put a down payment on a house. However, it's very hard these days for us to do that. So this definitely helps save that money.
According to new census data, living with roommates is the fastest growing type of household, up 54% in the last 20 years.
Very often it is actually a strategy to cope with housing affordability.
Experts say the numbers offer valuable lessons for addressing the housing crisis.
If people can't afford suitable housing on their own, then they're going to look to live with someone else, and whether that means returning to live at home with parents or perhaps an extended family member.
The census also found that multi-generational families continue to increase, up 45% over the last 20 years. The number of people living alone continues to grow, 4.4 million in 2021, making up 15% of adults over the age of 15. Those living alone tend to be older, likely staying in their homes, which economists say also creates pressure on the housing market.
We have this diversity of housing needs, which means it's not going to be just about building condos from now on. We're going to need a mix of all sorts of different housing.
So it's looking like a home now, which is nice.
Back at her apartment, Patel is hopeful.
But it'd be nice to kind of live on my own. But for now, it's nice to do this for a couple years.
A hope that being part of the fastest growing household demographic isn't long term. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, Toronto.
A significant number of police officers across Canada are feeling overworked, stressed, and burned out. That's according to a survey released to CBC News by the Canadian Police Association. The association represents 60,000 police personnel across the country, and as Jason Vio reports, it's calling for systemic changes to improve the culture of policing.
If you look at the stress and the burnout levels, they're pretty terrifying.
Carleton University professor Linda Duxbury has been examining the well-being of police officers for 20 years. She says her most recent research paints a problematic picture. She's found officers across Canada are facing increased workloads with more calls related to mental health and addiction, reduced staffing levels, and an organizational culture that places a high premium to prioritize work over family.
If their health is in jeopardy because they're overworked, too much to do, don't know what they're supposed to do, priorities are not being set for them, then it's a real challenge in terms of their ability to deliver to the community.
How you're going to interact with another person in a difficult set of circumstances, and are you going to be able to manage that situation calmly, or is the situation going to escalate because you're fatigued and you're maybe not as patient as you should be?
The Canadian Police Association participated in Duxbury's research during the fall of 2020, the second wave of the pandemic. The data shows 35% of frontline officers surveyed went to work when mentally unwell, and 31% did so when physically ill.
So of course it affects the public, and I think ultimately that's why we should all be concerned about things like this.
Recruiting officers is also more difficult.
Policing is facing a crisis in resourcing and having applicants and people apply to do the job. And part of that is funding, because we need the funding in order to hire the people to come and do the job. But it's also a diminished appetite from the current youth.
The Canadian Police Association says leaders need to take note and make systemic, structural changes to alleviate pressures.
We need to work towards, and I call it sort of getting back to our core business, right? We have tried to be everything to everyone, and that's not actually, there was never an ill intent there. It was actually well intended.
Still, experts say there's a lot of talk about changing the culture of policing and very little actually being done. Jason Vio, CBC News, Windsor, Ontario.
And it is 6:44 p.m. There's a live look at the coastline off of Hanson Island on the north end of Vancouver Island. Gorgeous night. A little bit of cloud and perhaps looks like even some rain out there. It's still sunny, though, here on the south coast. Johanna has her full forecast next.
We are going to make a special treat called No-churn ice cream. You do not even have to have an ice cream machine to make it. It takes really simple ingredients.
So here's the scoop. To make it, you have to understand how temperature transforms a slushy goo into partly frozen perfection.
So I'm adding 1 1/4 cup of sweetened condensed milk. Sugar is one of the most important ingredients in ice cream because we do not want ice cream to freeze at the temperature at which water freezes into ice. Having sugar in ice cream is very similar to putting salt on the roads in the wintertime.
Water freezes at 0 degrees, but sugar freezes at a lower temperature, so it slows down the freezing process.
And this sweetened condensed milk makes it so that it's scoopable and it's not hard as a rock.
Sweet! But here's the cold hard truth. When I tried to freeze my sweetened milk, it turned into this. Obviously, I need something else to whip mine into shape.
Milk fat in ice cream is key. I have 2 cups of very cold, heavy whipping cream, and we're trapping in air when we're whipping.
Whipping the cream causes bits of fat to bang together, forming long strands that resemble a pearl necklace. Those fat beads, called globules, wrap around air bubbles and prevent them from escaping.
Air is such a critical ingredient in ice cream.
Critical because adding air adds volume as the cream turns to foam. That will help create a stable structure that won't collapse.
And what you want with your whipped cream is beautiful stiff peaks, just like we have here. When you have air, it actually helps the ice cream become more fluffy and easier to scoop at frozen temperatures. You do not want to over whip it because if you do, you will create butter. So I like to fold it in as gently as possible in order to keep some of that air trapped in. Honestly, anything with chocolate sandwich cookies pretty much rocks my world. So we've made our final layer with our no-churn ice cream. We're simply just gonna put a lid on top of it and stick it in the freezer.
This is where that miracle of physics happens, when 3 states of matter come together. The gas in ice cream and the fats help create a solid structure. But the liquid only becomes partially frozen in the form of ice crystals.
Whether it's the ice crystals, the air cells, or the fat globules, it's all a balance to make sure that we are getting to the right texture as well as the right flavor so that when we eat the ice cream, we fall in love. Cheers.
Some sad news for the city's arts community. A longtime director of the Vancouver Symphony has died. Bramwell Tovey was at the podium from 2000 until 2018. One of the most poignant performances was in 2015 when the Symphony performed Fauré's Requiem. It's a mass for the dead. The performance came the same week as horrific terrorist attacks in Paris. CBC's Andrew Chang sat down with Bramwell shortly before that performance, and he spoke of the power of music to help people grieve, bring people together, and in the end, to heal.
Maestro Bramwell Tovey.
Andrew, nice to meet you. Bramwell, please.
Bramwell, tell me about tomorrow's performance, what you have planned.
Well, we planned this a long time ago, 18 months to 2 years ago, and we're going to perform two major choral works, Stravinsky's Symphony of Psalms, and perhaps the most pertinent one for this month is Fauré's Requiem, which was premiered in Paris in 1888, and it's an incredible liturgical choral work, probably the most famous French choral work, and it's an unfortunate happenstance that it's this weekend.
What went through your mind as you were preparing for this performance, which, as you say, had been in the works for quite some time, when you heard about what had happened, the attacks in Paris? How did that affect you?
Well, I think, first of all, the attacks, when they happened, you just, as a human being, you just react to them. And then, of course, how does that impact on our lives? Everybody's life is different, and in our particular case here, of course, as an orchestra, as a community of musicians, we have to come together to play this music with the choruses that are working with us this weekend. And all of a sudden, it has an impact beyond anything that we'd imagined, a dreadful impact.
Well, how do you see the music differently now, as opposed to 2 weeks ago?
I think 2 weeks ago, I was preparing it as a work of art, as a choral piece. Now, it's taken on a kind of metaphysical presence. It's taken on a kind of substantial role, I think, in the world community. For me, for the orchestra, I think it's our responsibility to play it perhaps with that extra special care and attention that Leonard Bernstein talked about once when he said, our answer to the violence is actually to play music more beautifully than ever before. The words are about rest eternal. Please grant the souls who have died eternal rest, O Lord. If you like, it's the song of the victims. It's the people who never had a chance to articulate what was happening to them. And in this music, even though it was written a century and a half ago, it's still got a pertinence and a relevance to the people who were murdered in Paris last week. Although we actually won't invite the audience to have a moment of silence, I'm absolutely certain that there'll be silence at the end, because the impact of this music is so powerful, so emotional, that I think that when the orchestra stops, when the chorus stops, when finally Fauré delivers us back to silence, the silence will be pregnant with meaning this weekend.
Bramwell, nice to meet you.
Pleasure, Andrew.
You know, Joe, I really remember as a little girl going to the VSO and seeing Bramwell up there. So he left, you know, I know, he left quite a gap in the city. And of course, now with him gone, it's I think many people are missing him.
Yeah, you said it, a big loss to our community, but so nice to see him speak so eloquently about that big moment and the impact of music. I'm going to take you to the forecast as we head into another hot and sunny stretch, starting with, yes, something that we're keeping our eye on, the fire danger rating. Notice the south creeping up, moderate to high, even pockets of extreme. Nothing too alarming given that we don't have lightning strikes in the forecast, but we'll keep an eye on that. Also want to draw your attention to the temperatures tonight in Texas. High 30s. Houston has boasted itself as the most air-conditioned city on the planet, and they just had their hottest July day ever on record. Yesterday was 40.5 degrees, and the electrical grid company for the state asking people to conserve energy with their current heat wave. We are not dealing with that heat wave. Seasonal temperatures for the south, as that high pressure tries to protect us from continued low pressure systems hitting the south, the central coast, I should say. Prince Rupert, the north coast of Vancouver Island, it has been very showery indeed. We might see those showers sneak down across the island through Thursday night and Friday night. High pressure holding strong though for Metro Vancouver, but we may see a shower make its way into the forecast zone for Saturday morning. That's our best chance of a few sprinkles out there, which we could probably use at this point. Watching for those 30-degree temperatures into Kelowna, but notice how unsettled it is back up towards Williams Lake, Prince George. Fort St. John, though, in the Peace, you're on the other side of that low. Lots of sunshine for you. So here we go. Another warm and sunny week ahead. Increasing cloud for Friday, and I do have that risk of a morning shower on Saturday. Less of a chance on Sunday morning. I'll keep it in at this point. Leanne, I haven't been so bold as to actually enter the rain icon in yet. Let's see what tomorrow holds. I'm not convinced it's going to happen, so I'll keep you posted.
Okay, I like that you're convinced. We will remain convinced as well. Okay, thank you, Jo.
You're welcome.
Keeping cool at the zoo. Why popsicles were part of the menu at a Spanish zoo. That's next.
Tell me about how you got into all of this. What age were you when you got your first Etch-a-Sketch?
I was about 10 years old when I got my first one, and it was actually, I watched the movie Elf, and he's like really good at Etch-a-Sketching. So then I got an Etch-a-Sketch, and then I figured I wish I could do what they did, so I kind of started doing it.
The rest is history. And
Yeah.
since then you've done like, what, hundreds?
Well, it was kind of, I took a break after, and then over the pandemic, a lot of people picked stuff up, so I picked up Etch-a-Sketch again. And then I kind of just kept going, and then I got into TikTok and went off from there.
And TikTok, you have now over 100,000 followers, millions of likes.
Cousin Dolores can hear a pin drop. My thing has kind of become doing time lapses where I do a bunch of sketches all together. So these can take, I'd say, about 3 hours to do. And then I kind of put it all together with the music.
Her most popular one so far, this recreation of the Phineas and Ferb theme, one of her favorite childhood shows.
Like maybe building a rocket or fighting a mummy or climbing up the Eiffel Tower.
And then I've also done like the periodic table theme song.
There's hydrogen and helium, then lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon everywhere, nitrogen all through the air.
And the Big Bang Theory.
Neanderthals developed tools, we built a wall. We built the pyramids, math, science, history, unraveling the mystery. It all started with a Big Bang. Hey!
What are some of your favorite drawings that you've done on an Etch-a-Sketch?
I think one of my favorite was the most difficult one I did, and that was the Titanic. I did it over a span of a whole bunch of days, but I'd say that probably took like 7 hours or so because I did shading and everything on that, but that was like the first like big one.
This one she made permanent, which requires disassembling the Etch-a-Sketch and removing the powder inside.
So for Etch-a-Sketch Day, you did this, the logo for CBC, and this is not permanent yet.
That one's not permanent, but it will be permanent. I'd say this one took about, I think, 3 hours. Yeah, so I started with the outline, but I'd say the same thing that kind of took the longest was coloring it all in. Yeah, because when you color it, you're just, like I said, doing lines back and forth, and you have to make sure it's all filled in. And then I'm gonna do a little sketch of the minions. So the right knob is vertical lines, and then the left knob is horizontal lines. The first part of the circle, you're turning the left knob clockwise, and you're turning the right knob counterclockwise.
Has it become kind of like muscle memory for you now
It
that
has,
you're going really
yeah.
fast?
I don't really have to think about it anymore.
And voila, this one done in just 10 minutes.
I think it's really patience because I feel like anybody could do this. Okay. Well, I
don't know about that.
Not everybody, but if you put the work in and you put the time in and you have the patience, I think you could get to a point that it's like, it's pretty impressive.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Join CBC Vancouver at the 15th Annual Surrey Fusion Festival, a celebration of food, music, and culture on July 23rd and 24th at Holland Park. Plus, it's free to attend. Visit surreyfusionfestival.ca for more info. And tune in to On the Coast Wednesdays for The Climate Changers, a new special series about the people who are taking action against climate change. Learn more at cbc.ca/BC.
A cool treat to beat the heat for some lucky animals at the Madrid Zoo. Zookeepers were giving out popsicles there with a twist to hydrate the animals amid a scorching heat wave. Fruit, meat, or fish-laced frozen treats were given out. They varied according to the animals' food preferences. A panda took a shine to those watermelon popsicles, and that lion there preferred frozen delights containing beef. And in the aquarium, fish popsicles proved popular with the seals, and that rhino there, just a cold shower hit the spot. A humpback whale wowed a group of boaters in New Brunswick. It appeared beside their boat in the Bay of Chaleur, about 10 kilometers offshore.
Oh, wow.
Take a look at this breathtaking sight as the marine giant breached the water's surface, splashing and jumping and rolling about 300 meters in front of the boat. It's a rare sighting for this part of the bay. The boaters and the whale followed each other for about an hour along the coastline. Video of the close encounter has been posted online and garnered more than 90,000 views so far. Well, you can count another view with us tonight. That was very cool to watch. All right, that's it for us. Thank you for being with us this evening on CBC News at 6. Just to remind you, if you're not already watching us on CBC Gem, you might want to check it out. It's commercial free, always nice. And tonight, Dan Burt will be in for our late show, so that is on at 11 p.m. after the National. Have a good night.